Hey, wonderful people, welcome back. I have returned from Lake Omak. It was fantastic. Um, I will work on putting a link together and figure out how to do that in some later videos. But I'll also let you guys know when it's time to book for that for next year. Back to the cutthroat trout and the tides. I thought we were going to finish up today, but we're not. We're going to go at least one more. But today I want to talk about tide height and how that impacts, tide flood and ebb, and how that impacts predatory behavior through the behavior of the prey. A lot of the prey that is available to coastal cutthroat trout in the Sound is they live in the beach. Okay, they're burrowing prey. Some of them shallow, some of them deep. Meaning they have shallow burrows or deep burrows or no burrows, dens, whatever. And some of them prefer to live further down the tide table, close to zero or negative. Some of them don't care. They're all in all tide heights. Before we go any further, let's grab the instruction board. So one thing to understand about the tides in the Sound, I got a general beach here. This is probably a little bit steep, but it doesn't matter. We have a flood tide in this particular scenario, and I've got some different types of critter dens here that one might find, some burrows. The first thing I want to get across though is that most of the time, all of the time isn't fair, but most of the time, the beaches that we're fishing on the Sound are permeable. The water goes deep into the beach. Furthermore, the lower on the tidal level that a point on the beach is, the deeper the water permeation goes. So even if you're standing on the beach right here, the water goes 15, 30, 40 feet behind you. And less as you go up. The animals that live in the beach strata choose where they are based on the water submersion that they need all the time. Some animals don't need to be submerged all the time. Some do, and they acquire that submersion through denning or burrowing. Also, something to just keep in mind, and this is also just very general, the higher one goes, the more on a beach or on the tide table, the more prone the burrows are going to be angular. So they'll be angled back because once the beach is permeated 12 feet back or however many feet back, well, it stays permeated much longer than the beach just a foot into itself. After this tide is done flooding and it starts to ebb and it's way down here, well, this much of the beach has dried out, but back here it's still wet. Okay, so the animals in the burrows and dens, they are able to sense the tide height by the water that is infiltrating or exfiltrating from their dens, and they adjust themselves accordingly. An animal that lives, a critter, prey that lives high on the tide table, it understands just intrinsically, instinctively, that it doesn't have a long period of time to come out of its den, do what it needs to do in the water, and then go back into its den before the tide rises and falls. Where conversely, an animal that's down here or even here, he has a lot more time. These animals tend to be very fast moving. These animals tend to be slower moving, mollusks and such like that. Well, this impacts predatory behavior. Okay, the higher one goes on the flood tide, the less time the trout have to feed, because they know that, from 8 to 12, rising from 8 to 12 and then back down to 8 doesn't take as much time as it takes to go from 0 to 8 and then back down. This is just a hypothetical tide, a 0 to 12. Okay, so the higher one goes, the higher the flood goes, as an angler, the more speed you might want to induce into your presentations. Okay? The trout hunting zone doesn't really change. What does change is the structure on the beach, the slope of the beach. This is kind of probably a little bit too steep of a representation. A lot of beaches in the Sound are much less steep than this. They have a lot less slope. So the hunting zone might expand this way, but the ideal depth doesn't change, okay? Furthermore, the trout that live on this beach, they know what lives where. Now down here where you have mollusks, the trout have an abundance of time to go and grab onto a clam neck and rip off the end of the clam neck while it's sitting here for hours feeding. It's a difficult task and it's costly on their face. A lot of times you'll see like gashes and slashes on the cutthroat gill plates. That's them grabbing onto clam necks, and the clam neck pulling them down, pulling their face, jamming their face into the beach, and they're wriggling it free. So these slashes are oftentimes like, That's that struggle. It's not their favorite, but they do it. Whereas little sand lance and small ghost shrimp, sand shrimp, same thing, crabs, they're faster prey and they're living up here. They're very readily available to them, but there's a lot of chasing involved. Number one, these critters are more active and the trout have less time to get to them. So as the tide floods onto a beach, the trout are targeting prey that's more and more active and simultaneously, more and more pressed for time. They don't have time. Truthfully, they may have 2 hours or less or more, but they don't have a 6-hour tide window to come out, reinforce their home structures, and also feed, and also mate, and all the things that they need to do. As the tide rises, I am increasingly, first of all, as the tide rises, the trout are pressing into the rising tide, because as it comes up, the critters immediately take advantage of the opportunity to be in the water. And they do so with increasing quickness as the tide gets higher. So a trout does down here, he doesn't really need to press very much into the tide, because once it's flooded, these critters are going to be exposed for hours. He can certainly take his time and find something that he's looking for, or critters, forage fish and such, and shrimp from the deeper water will come up here and try to take advantage of the the submerged and more exposed vegetation that they can feed on. Or there might be eggs that have been deposited in here that they can feed on. So there's time for him to hunt down here, less time for him to hunt up here. And the prey up here is very focused on what it needs to be doing, and it's very focused on getting its tasks done in a short amount of time. So it's very fast up here less fast down here. Like sometimes from the beach, I'll tie a worm pattern on a jig hook with dumbbell eyes and cast it out there on a type 9 line and then just let it sit on the bottom and just move it inches at a time and let it sit there. Move it inches at a time and let it sit there. And the tail will be made out of foam so that the thing sits upright. And I'm just moving it a little bit to give it a little bit of action so it looks like a clam neck or some kind of a worm that's just sitting there, and they'll just come pick it up. They're not slamming it because they don't need to. The takes up here are much more aggressive. So not only am I, as an angler, aware of the tide height, but I'm also adjusting my presentation, right, to match the hatch or match the behavior of the prey here. The prey are very sensitive to beach permeability, and they use beach permeability to tell them when to go, when it's safe to come out, and then they use it as shelter as the tide goes back down. The last thing I'll say about this, and then we'll get into the other topic next week. The higher the tide is, if I'm out here in a boat, the more lateral I want my presentation to be. These fish, these critters, not fish, really hardly, but these critters don't want to come out here. It's just not their zone. They're here. And the trout know that, and they're focused on this little hunting zone right in here. And it can extend out and everything. It extends further down, but this is just a general representation. So as the tide, 8, 10, even 6 feet, if it's lower than that, a lot of times I'm casting right in and then bringing it out, because a lot of times they're feeding out here, because they're looking for stuff coming in, and the stuff up down here is sticking up, and it's more opportunity. It's a wider hunting zone. But the trout that are really hungry and they need to eat, they want to eat now, they're focused in this zone right here, because stuff's coming out, stuff's coming in. They're jetting up and down along the shoreline, trying to complete their tasks, and the trout are primarily focused right in here. The longer I can keep my fly in this zone, the more likely it's going to attract trout predation. So even though I'm out here to keep my shadow and my presence away from the beach, I'm casting as laterally as I can while still hitting the beach. And then I'll throw a reach cast in toward the beach either way to help the line stay along the beach. Now, I'm going to say one more thing. I think I already said this is the last thing, but I'm going to say one more thing. This picture is representing a beach that doesn't have a lot of current flow. In the next video or two, we'll get into how current flow alters tidal feeding in trout, because it has a big impact. But on a beach like this, and I should have drawn some more structure here, but it is what it is. Critter presence and where they den has an impact on the speed of trout predation. They can eat and hunt slowly down here, but it's quite frantic up here. You've experienced this, where if you put the fly on any tidal height, you put the fly right on the beach, most of the time the most aggressive hits you're going to get are right here. Cast it out there. Strip, bam! That's because he's expecting his prey to be very frantic and quick right at the leading edge of the tidal zone, because that's what those prey are doing. Out here, it's not uncommon for a trout to come vertically, if the fly is like way back here, it's not uncommon for that trout to be down here, then to see this up here pressed against the shoreline, giving him an ambush opportunity, and he'll come up vertically and take it. Or they'll follow it and follow it and follow it, nip, 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 because they don't feel the same pressure, because they know that as long as they're under it and they have it pressed against the surface of the water, there's not a lot of place for it to seek shelter. So they can kind of investigate it, or they'll just nip at its tail, whack, whack, whack. Where here, they assume they have no time. This is the ideal casting zone on either a flood or an ebb tide, because they're not taking the time for investigation, because they're assuming that the critters here have emerged from their den and they're close to their den, so they're harder to target for the trout naturally. There's less time, these are faster moving, and they're close to the security of not only the super shallow water, but also their structure here, and there's dens and stuff that they can get into, or little rocks they can go under. So lateral casts, fast retrieves. Think about this. This is how I instruct my anglers often. When you make a good cast, you're fishing from the boat, think 5 out, 5 down. Cast it right here, pull it 5 feet out, then let it go 5 feet down, then keep retrieving. Unless you see a fish following it, then keep it cooking. But if you don't, bring it 5 feet out, maybe more, maybe less. You'd have to adjust it, but it's just a general rule. 5 feet out, 5 feet down. Bring it 5 feet out, then give it some slack, let it drop, an estimate of 5 feet, or adjust it for the beach, and then start bringing it again into this hunting zone where more of these critters live. Hope this one's helpful. We got 1 or 2 more, definitely 2 more videos, coming on the tides, and then we're going to move on to other stuff. Thank you, wonderful people. It's been a pleasure.